fine. Everything's, you're gonna walk out that door, and the day is just gonna be just like any other day, just like it was before you walked in the door, so on and so forth. Oh, there's a typo. Billions of people are doing billions of things perfectly safely right this moment, just like you. Your takeaway should be, there are simple steps we all can take to mitigate risk, and we all should continually strive to be safer. I don't know how many slides I have. We're really here to talk about working in shops and theaters. Technically, these are industrial environments, and there has been much investment in discovering the root causes of accidents. 7 surefire ways to cause an accident. Shortcut, overconfidence, poor or lack of housekeeping, starting a task before getting on necessary information, neglect of safety procedures, mental distractions, lack of preparation. Who practices these every day? Me. I do. I am bad at most of these things. So, I have many, many shortcuts, and there's a time whenever you can do something a quicker way, and there's times whenever you can do something stupid that you think is going to be faster that isn't. So be careful. And being overconfident about, oh, I already know what I'm doing. You don't need to tell me what I'm doing. You know how many students come into my scene shop and say stuff like, oh yeah, no problem. It's not most of them. Most of them are more like, no, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never touched anything to, don't talk to me. Pay attention to all those things. Let's look at some handouts. Oh, this is where I was supposed to look at, we already did all that. Oh, that's the end of that's it. So that was much closer to the end. Yes, what do we want to talk about?
Clothing.
Clothing. We didn't talk
PPE.
about clothing. What's that?
PPE.
PPE. We talk about that. We talk about PPE in one of the other things, but we can talk about it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But clothing you should for sure talk about.
So, we talked about my shoes a little bit. What else do you observe about my clothing that might make me a good or bad candidate to be working in an industrial environment? Yes. My shirt's tucked in. Yes, ma'am?
You have longer sleeves.
I have longer sleeves on, so I can roll those down, cover up my bare skinny arms. Yes, Oscar? I wear. I have glasses on.
I was going to say the sleeves.
Say the sleeves.
Yeah.
Pockets. Debatable. Go ahead.
Wearing jeans.
I'm wearing jeans. That was the one I was looking for. What do we know about jeans? They're kind of sturdy. They deflect a lot of stuff. They're not baggy and loose and flopping around and things like that. But they're a sturdy material that can take some abuse. That's what I'm looking for when I'm looking for people in the scene shop. I'm looking for shirts that aren't, clothing that's not hanging off and loose. I can tell the story of Ann McNeely. Ann McNeely is the mother of Daniel McNeely, who was one of my classmates in high school. And she was working at a manufacturing plant running a drill press, and it was cold out on the factory floor, and she had her flannel shirt on. That was her husband's shirt, and it was too big for her, and she's wearing it, and she's running this drill press, and she gets the sleeve caught in the spinning drill press, and it starts wrapping the sleeve up all the way up her shoulder. It pulls, it's just going really fast. Pulls her in, hits her head on the drill press, knocks her out, rips a big chunk of her hair out. Pretty bad accident. Luckily, she had a slight concussion. She went back to work the next day. She wasn't dead. But it was one of those things where she was wearing clothes that were loose and floppy, and she didn't take care of them. One of the ways to prevent that is to roll your sleeves up, or do things like that to make sure your sleeves aren't loose. The big thing is jewelry and necklaces and earrings and things like that. There was a girl who was a friend of my girlfriend, my first girlfriend in college. That girl broke my heart. Anyway, she's a beautiful, amazing human being that's having her best life, and so it was very sad though. But they had gone to a overnight camp at on a college campus. and this was back before we had, key card access and push buttons and things. And so they had one key for 4 girls that were staying in this one dorm room in this dorm building. And so they had gone out in the hallway, and there's a piece of conduit on the wall, and there was a junction box there. And so they decided that they were gonna put the key on top of the junction box. Hide the key on top of the junction box. So they hid the key on top of the junction box, and the girl comes back, and she can't quite reach it, and so she jumps up to grab the key and catches her ring on the corner of the junction box and almost pulled her finger completely off the lock. So yeah, be careful, that can happen. Watch what you're wearing, especially if you're wearing jewelry. I don't wear a wedding band. I am married, I have a wedding band. It's at home in a thing. I was welding one day and I touched the gold ring against the hot metal, and it scared me bad enough that was the day I took my wedding band off, because it got so hot that I thought I don't have a scar on my finger. I do know guys that have scars on their finger from where their gold. What do we know about gold? It's an excellent conductor. It conducts heat really fast. And so they literally have scars around their fingers where they got burnt because of the ring that they had on their finger. So the thing that I would encourage you to wear, to think about is, I wear shoes. I wear work boots, so I never have to think about it. Don't ever come to my shop wearing open-toed shoes. Flip-flops. Crocs count as open toes. I don't care what you say about Crocs. Why don't Crocs? Well, here's the problem with most shoes. Like, I see some sneakers here and things like that. They're very soft. And if you drop something on your toes, they're not really offering that much protection. If you drop a heavy thing. If you're, sawdust and metal shavings and, crap is one thing. But if I'm dropping 2x4s or stage weights, your toes do not have a chance. How many people believe that steel-toed shoes are dangerous because they can pinch your feet if something lands on your foot? None of you? Okay, good. There's a myth out there that you don't want to wear steel-toed shoes because it'll crush down on your toes and then they won't be able to get your shoe off. Guess what? If the thing that's hitting your toes is hard enough, is hitting your toes with enough force to damage the steel-toed shoes, your toes don't have a chance. Period. End of conversation. So, your toes are always better off in a steel-toed boot than they are in not. Wear something that covers your. I don't have strong rules about covering your legs, and people do wear shorts in the shop. But I always wear something to cover my legs, mostly because nobody needs to see those. And make sure that if you're cold, that you're wearing something that's tight-fitting and you don't have a loose, floppy sweatshirt or something on like that. Jewelry is just jewelry. No, just don't. So people do, but don't. Other thoughts? We're going to talk more about that when we get into the other PowerPoint too. PPE. What does PPE stand for? You all should know this.
Personal protective equipment.
Personal protective equipment. Why do you know this? Because COVID. None of you would have known that term before COVID. I mean, a few of you might have. But PPE was like one of those things nobody really knew about, but now the whole world knows about it because COVID came along. So, when you come to the shop, we're going to offer you hearing protection for certain situations. We're going to offer you hard hats for certain situations. We're going to make you wear safety glasses all the time. We're going to have gloves for you and things like that. So, protective equipment, and it depends on what industry you're working in and what environment you're working in. Sometimes you'll have a life preserver on as part of your PPE because you're working out over a river or the ocean or something like that. So, what else? I'm kind of rambling now.
Could you talk about training on end equipment, specific equipment training?
I did not. We do talk about that at some point, but I'm not sure what class session. That's in one of the PowerPoints. So what I'll touch on quickly is training. So you've arrived at a new job, and there's a piece of equipment that you need to operate. The training that you need to operate that equipment is specific to that piece of equipment at that specific location for that specific job. the training may or may not translate to other pieces of equipment at other locations for doing other things. Like, if I learn to drive a forklift at this particular warehouse, I'm receiving training on that particular forklift in that particular environment. If I go to a different warehouse and there's a forklift, I can still operate the forklift, but I have not received training on that forklift at that location. Does that make sense? And so make sure that as you receive training on different things, that even though there's a lot of transferable skills, the training might be different in different ways. One location might have bumpy ground hazards, and the other might have electrical or chemical hazards that aren't present at the first location. Those kinds of things. So make sure that you're training, that if you're receiving training, that it is, and employers are required by law to give you training. If you show up and just start using a piece of equipment at their place of employment and things go wrong and they haven't given you any training, then they have some responsibility. You also have a lot of responsibility because you didn't demand training and you caused the accident because you were the one driving the forklift. They weren't driving the forklift when the accident happened. Okay? So make sure that whenever and this is a hard one because a lot of young people show up at a job site, they don't want to look stupid, they don't want to ask a lot of questions, they don't want to cause kerfuffle, they want to make sure they keep the job and get the paycheck, and so they go on and do things. The Rhode Island nightclub fire, one of the list where they killed 100 people. That happened because a person just like one of you was the kid there running the show, and he went out and loaded the pyro into the flesh pots, the Roman candle things, and he was just doing his job. And when it came to the time of the show, he pushed the button on the thing and the Roman candles went off and it set the ceiling on fire because the people that had installed the soundproofing material had bought soundproofing from, Weeby Bubba and Soundproofing up the street because they knew a guy who got some stuff and they stapled it up and it did the job. But it wasn't fire rated. And so when they set it set it on fire, and then nobody could get out because there was an exit problem. There were many problems. But the kid, he was a 20-year-old kid that pushed the button, killed 100 people. So make sure you're not that person. Make sure that you're asking the right questions. Make sure, and it's hard to know what questions to ask, and it's hard to be able to say, no, I'm not pushing the button. If you want the freaking pyro to go off, push it yourself because I'm out. Because then they would have said, well, you don't have a job anymore too. So there's a million reasons why people don't step up and ask questions or say something is because they're, for whatever reason. They're a low person on the totem pole. They want to keep their job, they're whatever. There's hundreds of reasons why people make those decisions. Try and be thoughtful about that and make sure that you're making decisions that benefit everyone. And sometimes you have to a buddy of mine said this one time, sometimes you have to talk with your feet. Sometimes you just have to say, nope, I'm out. I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. You're not paying me to take this responsibility, and so therefore I'm not going to take this responsibility. Thoughts, comments, questions? Go.
So if they do try and fire you over something like that, you just have to kind of accept it?
Well, it depends. It really does depend. I mean, there's so many variables in that. Yes, there are absolutely situations where you can say, not doing it, and they say you're fired, and then your next stop is at the lawyer's office saying, hey, this ding dong just fired me because I wouldn't murder this person for them. I'm exaggerating, but the point I think is valid. The employer was forcing me. The employer said my choices were be fired or do this thing that was wildly unsafe or illegal or whatever. And so yes, you would have some recourse there. Now, whether you would actually get anything out of that or not, is debatable. There are times and places where I have seen, when I was a kid, I remember there was a story near our hometown. I don't remember all the specific details of it, but somebody had lost their job, and they were suing the employer. And I was like, why would you? Because they wanted their job back. And I was like, why would you want your job back? Why would you even? Why? They fired you because they're obviously an asshole. Why would you even want to consider going back to work there? Well, the reason that they wanted to go back to work, and I was a kid and didn't really understand everything. The reason they wanted to go back to work was because they were 2 years from retirement. And if they didn't finish out their retirement, they wouldn't get their retirement pension. So they literally had hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake. They needed that job back or they had no retirement. And so that's an exaggeration, but that explains the situation. That's one of the reasons why somebody would choose to sue the employer that had just fired them. And there's a lot of law about when you can fire someone, how you can fire someone. There's also laws about, how you can quit. There are situations, most employment situations, if you're working at a fast food restaurant and you just say, okay, that's it, I'm out, and you walk out in the middle of the shift, there's probably not much legal recourse that they would have against you. But if you're running a nuclear power plant and you just bail in the middle of the shift, yeah, they could probably sue you for creating an unsafe situation. So there are certain situations where, so the big thing here, I think, is one of the fundamentals of life is communication. And make sure that you're doing the things that are healthy and best for you. When I was in graduate school, one of my professors said, there are 2 things that you absolutely have to have to be good at being a technical director, which is what I do. He said, first, pick your parents so that you get the right disposition and the right attitude and all the right things that you need to be a good technical director. And B, pick who you work for. Because if you're working for somebody that you don't like, you don't want to work for, they're asking you to do stupid things, then you're not going to be a good TD. And if you're not going to, so those 2 things. So pick who you work for. Is that it? Are we done?
Pretty close.
Okay. I mean, I can keep talking. I can always tell stories. Can I think of a good safety story? Yeah. I could talk about the Indiana State Fair.
Talk about the shattering light fixtures.
You should talk about shattering light fixtures.
Just stuff you don't expect to happen, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
that's the, yeah. So I was doing a show recently, and I did not wire the practicals. The practicals came wired. Practicals are when we put lights, let's say we decided this was a set we needed to install in the theater. And we would take light fixtures just like these, and we would put them not on the ceiling, but sort of hanging, suspended in the air in the theater, and we would call them practicals. We had practicals. We were in a schoolhouse, in an old schoolroom, and some of the practicals that came wired from the shop weren't working. And so on a break, we tried to fix those practicals. And we routinely do this thing that's called hot patching, right? Where you don't know exactly where the problem is, right? Is the problem with the power source or is the problem with the light? And so you take a light that is working, right? I know this light works, so therefore I know this power source works. And you take the power source and you plug the light that isn't working into the power source that you know is working to try to identify if the problem is at the light or at the
In the circuitry, yeah.
And this is pretty standard.
Yeah.
This is not a,
That light's connected to the theater lighting system. It's not working for whatever reason. I take the cord and I plug it into the wall just to make sure the light bulbs, that everything's working from here to there, so that then we can know that the problem is in the system or the light bulb isn't burnt out.
and so that is exactly what we did. We had this practical and we plugged it into the wall. And then there's smoke and fire. And then there's crashing glass. And then there's a whole bunch of people in the theater going, what the F just happened? And what had happened is that inside of the wiring of the fixture, the hot and neutral wires were touching. Inside of where the light bulb goes, right? Where you screw the light bulb. And that meant that we had created a short, and that short had traveled through the cable and had melted the plastic. And electrical fires get hot fast.
Yes.
And so that electrical fire had actually burned through the 16th inch aircraft cable that was holding up the light. So the light wasn't suspended by zip cord, by the
By the
power
wire.
cord. It was suspended by aircraft cable.
Very small aircraft cable.
But still,
steel
aircraft
cable.
aircraft cable.
That can hold hundreds of pounds.
And it, yes, it's probably has a close to 1,000 pound rating, right?
16th inch is about 350 pounds.
So the light fixtures weighed maybe 20 pounds, right?
Yeah.
We had to, these were safety,
Yeah, yeah.
and it burned in. I mean, it was long enough that we went like unplugged the thing,
Right.
but by then the fire had started, and we had. I mean, it was not even 10 seconds, right? Nobody was like, no one thought that thing was gonna crash to the floor. Yeah.
Good thing no one was under it.
Yeah.
Right? It's a really great thing that we didn't try to do that, you know, like while the performer was rehearsing
Yep.
or while other people were doing whatever else, right? Like, so, it's never fun. And then we have to decide, like, do we need to take all of these practicals down? Like, are all of the because this is one of 8, right? There are 8 things. So we decided that not turning them on was safe. As long as so we didn't turn any of them on. And then we inspected them and you like figure out what are you gonna do to make them safe. But it was a very, I don't know, right? It's just like
Yeah.
stuff happens.
Yep.
So they came wired wrong?
No.
They were
It
built-
got wired wrong by the people who wired it.
Oftentimes when
After.
we're doing practice for the stage, you can't just go to the store and buy a light and bring it home and screw it up to the ceiling like you would in your bedroom, right? So you go out and you buy a light fixture, you bring it back to the shop, you take it out of the box, you do a bunch of modifications to it, you weld stuff to it, you bolt stuff to it, you drill holes in it, you do this or that or whatever to connect the wires up to it, so that you can hang it in off of your theater rigging. And there's all kinds of modifications that could be done, or who knows what exactly happened here.
Well, it almost always requires more wire
Correct.
than what you, like, right, these lights in a schoolroom would have been fixed to the ceiling.
Right.
So the wire that came in it was this long, right? And we needed wire that was gonna go all the way to the lighting grid from where these were suspended. So they had to replace the wiring that it came with from the manufacturer
Add to it,
with
right, yeah.
wire that was gonna, so that's,
So yeah, so somebody at some workbench at the theater made,
yeah, I
made a
think
mistake.
what we later learned was that right, in an overworked, trying to be fast
Yep.
fashion,
Yep.
someone who had never wired practicals before was wiring practicals without the necessary information, right? They didn't understand the danger of these wires touching in this situation.
Maybe we're thinking about 5 different things instead of the one thing that they should have really
And
focused on.
no one
that
double checked the
moment.
work before it went in the air. So,
I'm sure we could find something off this list that would help explain why the door blew off the airplane the other day. So,
cool. Keep working on SketchUp.
yay.
That's your homework. Or not.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Big question.
Oh no.
In week 1, it said it's due, in the like overview, that it was due today. Scary. On the actual assignment, it said it's due the 15th. It's due the 15th, right? Okay, perfect.
Yes. And you can, yeah, yeah, and then we'll see you here on Tuesday for tools.
Yay.